Giddy up. Welcome back to Dr. BeeWell, the #1 cannabis podcast in the world. I'm your host, Steve Ivanovsky. On today's episode of DBW, we talk with a cannabis professional who, fortunately, for our benefit, has worn a ton of hats and has been exposed to many different facets in the industry. He has been caregiving in Maine for the last 6 years and has worked with some of the biggest brands in the state and elsewhere, coming in consulting in both the medical and the adult use markets, as well as having insight into the illicit market. This man has truly done it all. So please help me extend a warm welcome to our guest for today's show, Drew Patterson. What's up, dude?
Not much. Thank you guys for having me down. It's a great studio.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Appreciate you bearing with us our technical difficulties. Getting it going here today. We're just going to be shooting in wide, which is it's just still a giddy up. We're still learning here over at the Dr. BeeWell studio. So, Drew, tell me a little bit. You're a caregiver up in Maine for 6 years. But that's not what you do for your day job necessarily, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your day job.
Yeah. So, I know we were talking about my day job is at a full digital agency in Portland called Side C. And it's a full custom agency that we do a lot of really good work with nonprofits, a lot of cannabis work, international agency at this point. But that is what I do 9 to 5, but I have maintained my caregiver card since 2016, and up until about 2 years ago, consistently ran rooms in Maine since I moved there in 2016 or so from Austin, Texas.
Okay, cool. Now, so at Side C, what's your exposure to what has your exposure been to cannabis? So,
really, at Side C, my title is, Director of Business Development, which is just sales, bringing deals to Side C, and branding websites, whatever it may be. But, being in cannabis for the last couple of years, particularly in the Northeast, I was able to network pretty well and, meet a lot of people who had awesome products or, a really good business idea, but might not be executing well on branding or design, something like that I was able to fill that void at Side C cannabis-wise, and we've been able to work with some of the largest people in Maine and the East Coast, and, much like a lot of our nonprofit and charitable work we do, it kind of just snowballs. And we get a lot of business from cannabis companies that see another site we did for one that say that looks sick, we wanted to emulate that, and so on and so forth. So it's been really fun.
Now, is that when that company comes to you, did they ask, like, is it in kind? Are they like, oh, that website you made was so cool for that other company? Or is it like, damn, that website you made for that other company is so sick, we need you to make us a sweet website too?
It's a mixed bag. A lot of people are friendly competitors in that industry, and if there's one tool, well, first of all, the website has to be a tool that can be managed and used well by everyone, not just someone who's tech savvy. So, we build pretty websites and stuff, but we want it to function and convert to cash for your business,
Right.
We wanted to set you up for long-term success, not just be a directory of how to contact you. And that's what, when I tell people we build websites, I also have to expand on the fact that, we do everything that you would want done in a website package, information architecture, SEO, that kind of thing. You can search cannabis Lewiston, Maine, and a webpage we did will be the third one under there, under Weed Maps and Leafly, just because of a few SEO practices we do in all our web pages. Just little stuff like that we do that really just helps small businesses get where they need to be.
Cool. Now, so with the friendly competitiveness that's going on between, a lot of these businesses, As we all know, like the market is going to start to consolidate at some point, and a lot of these people are probably going to lose their businesses at some point. I think that's capitalism. That's what's going to happen. What do you think? What do you think about the market? What do you think where do you see Maine cannabis going in that direction?
So to clarify on market, you mean Maine medical market or rec market or just overall?
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about both. I think that they're separate markets, but they're also intrinsically linked to one another.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear bias on both sides. The rec people will say, oh, med has a handful of years left. It's on its way out. And the meds people will say, oh, we're here to stay. I honestly don't quite know how it's going to shake out for rec. In my opinion, meds solidified pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of forces out there, but at the end of the day, people in Maine have to keep in mind, in my opinion, again, that it is Maine. It is a small population base. Yes, we can sell to, whatever it is now, 20 something other medical states, and we can take the tourist market. But eventually the Maine market's going to be even less attractive than it already is to outside investments, big companies moving here, MedMen, those type of companies coming into Maine. And obviously they're here. The Theory Wellness, which, is technically a mass company, but is an MSO, a big company, Cureleaf, of course, and of course, Wellness Connection, which has its roots in Maine. And I could talk for 3 hours about them. Don't get me started. But, for every 10 businesses that might fail, there's 2 or 3 that have been doing it really well, like everything in Maine or in everything in the world, in my opinion. If there's 10 pizza shops in the town, 2 are going to be really good, 5 are going to be mediocre, and 3 are going to be shitty. Kind of how I feel about cannabis. The good brands are going to stand out, the ones that worked on their branding, that solidified their base and have a good product. The ones that, got outside money and did the green rush thing are obviously going to fail. And that's not a crazy point. Everyone knows that. You'll talk to people a lot who jumped into this, never grew a plant in their life. They have to check with their investor on everything. And you want to be like, just say your dad, stop saying investor. But, you deal with a lot of those people in the industry now. But to answer your initial question, I think med's in a really healthy spot. I think rec's leveling out. I think the med brands that are solidified in med for the last 10 years, just brands I care for, Hazy Hill, Salty, a few of the other guys down in Sanford who have plans to go rec, they have good product in med, and that's going to transfer over. If you were flying in here from California and opening up a rec shop tomorrow and having to source product relationships in Maine, that wouldn't work, in my opinion.
Right. No, for sure. And we have a guest, coming on, the owners of East Coast Cannabis, on the show, and they were, one of the first success stories to make that jump from medical cannabis to rec cannabis, and to hold those high standards that they held in med, to take those over to rec. So, I think that, companies like that are the ones who are probably going to be, successful.
Absolutely. I mean, I know another brand, and I don't know much about their product past their business model, but I believe it's AAA Pharmaceuticals in Manchester. They flipped from med to rec, and they had a loyal med following, but they did a really good job of keeping the prices really comparable, if not the same, and making it fair, and not putting medicine out of reach. Because for a lot of people, it is medicine.
Right. In Manchester?
Manchester, Maine.
Manchester, Maine. Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's just outside of Augusta.
Okay, yeah.
My Maine knowledge is shaky past really Auburn. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's what you're saying is resonates. There's going to be brands that people who have been doing it, people who are successful in medical. I don't think that they're going anywhere. I think that the state probably does make it, continues to make it a little bit harder on them. With all the the lobbying from probably, from the, from the rec markets, because there's so much money in that, and them needing to make profits, from the money that they've taken on from investment. I think that they'll just lobby so hard that, and the Maine medical lobbyists, will contest them as well, because they're strong as well. But they, I just, eventually it's going to just be harder for these, these med companies. They'll have to, like, right now there's not even any testing, for a lot, but the companies who are going to be around are the companies who are already doing the testing. So like when that becomes a, and that, if that ever does become a requirement, the companies who are already doing it and already, those are the companies who are going to survive. I just think that's, definitely, what do you think about that?
I mean, testing, that's always a hot button issue in the industry for so many reasons. Price, is the test accurate? What are the forces behind the reasons for the testing? I worked for a testing lab in Maine that was a great lab, but we would lose a lot of, I don't want to say lose deals, but we lost deals to other labs who weren't as ethical.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's
straight up.
That's really bad.
One lab, they would say, hey, we're going to rec. We're going to send identical samples to your lab and this lab. And one would come back way higher in THC and with mold, way higher in THC, low mold. Ours would come back lower THC, high mold. And guess where they went? Wow. That's just what people do.
And this is the rec market?
This is the rec market. Yeah. The rec, and a lot of the rec market early on, there was really like a handful of people producing most of the flower, and it was just being white labeled. I mean, you saw certain strains on there like Granimals and like Sexual Chocolate that was grown by one person in Auburn, Maine, and then just white labeled. And, you saw these rec companies putting $50, $60, $80 eighths out. And it was like, oh, I could just go to the guy who grew it and go to his shop and get it for $35, and then they wonder why they're struggling.
Right. You have to have a med card to probably go to that guy's shop, right?
No, I'm saying that particular company, they have a grow and then they serve their own shop, and
they have a rec
in-house
shop.
product. Yeah, like most companies, their in-house grow.
Yeah, right. So
it'd be 35, and you go down the street and that same eighth is like $60, and the economics of it don't make sense. And another bad part about it, if you're in the rec market, is the labels on products. You see when that was produced. You'll walk into 10 rec stores in Portland and see flour on the shelf 10 months ago, 8 months ago. Concentrates. Right. Go look for a concentrate that's discounted. I saw one from October 2022 recently, or even longer. It's rough. And I walk every day from the West End where I live to my office in Monument Square. So I walk past all these rec shops every day. And I walk past the med ones that are popping for the most part. And then you walk by the rec ones and they're dead. You see in the windows, you see the employees playing on the iPads. But that's another thing. That's the fallacy too, that I believe a lot of these rec shops set up like their Apple stores. What's more, weed, marijuana, I don't do the whole politically correct thing. Well, I call it cannabis now because I'm conditioned.
Yeah, cannabis, that's what we call it.
Weed, pot, dope, whatever you want to call it, like it's a personal product. And like you don't want to walk in, again, my opinion, I don't want to walk in a shop and have someone greet me with a lanyard and an iPad,
Yeah, that is, I will speak to that too, because I don't know why it's so successful and why I think maybe it's just the best way to serve customers. Maybe, that's probably what it is. And it's probably where it started, technology started to come along and it, it made it easier to come up with the iPad and someone comes up. But that experience, man, like I can't say how much I hate it. I hate it. And if that's the rec experience, you go in and you're in a line with people, and then you go into a med shop and you have your med card and you can, you know the people you have engaged. And even if you don't, you have engagement, and even if you don't know them, you're just a new customer, you're going to get that same level of engagement, and they're going to, let you see the products and get in there a little bit. And like, it's a personal product. So I do think that med will, for people who like cannabis and have liked it for that way, not this new, the new market that, that's coming on, the new, the new people who are, starting to adopt. I think that that they're just going to, they're always going to be that way. You know, they're always going to want to go to the med shop, and they're always going to want to talk to the guy and smell the weed and do the thing. And that's not impossible in a rec shop. So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, that's huge too. You can't smell it. You can't look at it. You know, you could ask a bud tender, oh, like, what are you after today? And you're like, oh, I'll take a look at the BHO menu. And they might be like, what? You know, or you ask what pool this $80 a gram rosin is, and they look at you like you're speaking Japanese. Like, it's interesting that a lot of these bud tenders don't. I hate that term, bud tender, by the way.
Yeah, bud tender, it's weird.
If I'm just being honest,
bartender, like, it's like the, you know, I mean, why do you hate it?
Do we call the cashier at the gas station a gas tender?
Yeah,
no, they're cashiers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
And I very rarely have talked to a bud tender who knows more than the average everyday cannabis user does about a product.
Right.
And more often than not at reputable shops, but more often than not, you're getting recommended what needs to go.
Yeah, it's just a stupid marketing term.
The fish is turning on Tuesday, push the fish, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Old product. Same with any concentrate you see, you know, like went into a shop the other day, and I don't rarely shop retail, but I'm in Portland, so I'll pop into places, and I saw $75 gram or $80 gram of hash rosin discounted to $52. And I was like, interesting. How old is that? And it was 1.5 years old. And
it can still be on the shelf at 1.5 years?
Yeah. For med, I think in med, and again, I don't know because I don't.
Oh, this is a med shop, you're saying?
Med shop,
oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And even in rec, I believe in rec, it's up to the jurisdiction. I believe different towns have different codes about storage and temperatures and that. I know the city of Portland, a company did drinks in the rec market, and the city of Portland made them put droppers on them. They had this beautiful label, beautiful design, all that. And then the city of Portland came in and said, oh, for dosing reasons, you have to, you know, put one of those pipette dosers with a rubber band around it on your beautiful design product.
Right. For a drink?
Yeah, for a drink. So just stuff like that.
Right.
And then, you know, you'll see, I don't know if it's code or not, but most of the time you obviously want your rosin, other concentrates in the fridge. There
probably like is a reason for the pipette though, you know, like a lot of these people who are coming to this market, you know, Maine has what, like 1.5 million people population, but they get 10 million visitors in the summertime from April to October. So it's like a lot of these people who come here, like they might need the pipette, you know, they might need dosing, and they also don't, you know, they don't really know how much to take. So that's kind of like at the farm, you know, the pharmacy training in me, like always thinks like dosing, like we need to tell these people what's going on. We need to, you know, train them with, you know, what the right amount to take, because it's always dose dependent. Anytime you have a negative outcome, it's, you know, almost entirely dose dependent.
Yeah. I mean, edible dosing is so across the board. I don't think there's any science or rhyme or reason to it. I think people get your dose dialed in, and that's kind of your dose. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a hard ass or anything, but like my dose is like 250 milligram for, you know, like a full spectrum edible. Like if it's a hash rosin, I'll cut it down to like 152 to get high. Cause when I smoke or when I use an edible, I'm doing it to enjoy it and get high.
Right.
So that's kind of my dosage. And then, you know, in rec, if I were to buy a rec product at retail prices, the dosage caps at 100, more likely than not 99, 95, you know, because no one can quite get it all the way there. I'd be paying upwards of like, I don't know, $100, $30 a pop for 300 milligrams. Like,
yeah, for someone like you, it just doesn't compute.
Well, that's,
you know,
just,
for a high, what did you call yourself earlier? A high tolerance user, a high?
Yeah, my tolerance is pretty high, just because, I mean, like everyone that's been smoking for a while, like you just get
when did you start smoking?
However old you are in 7th, 8th grade.
13, 12, 13.
12, 13. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So I was telling you before the show, I just had a son, and I tried cannabis when I was in, you know, 7th, 8th grade. I didn't start smoking cannabis like, you know, consistently or, you know, even till college, you know, later in college, probably till like my 5th or 6th year. And then I stopped using cannabis for a while. And then, you know, I started using it medically to help me with anxiety. And, you know, that's when I kind of was just like, wow, there's really something to plant medicine, and I need to explore this more. And, you know, traditional pharmacy obviously, you know, wasn't for me. My tolerance, like, you know, has gone back and forth in terms of, it's never been like, you know, I couldn't take 250 milligrams. That would definitely put me out. But I think that it's definitely like person specific, you know?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I don't think it has much to do with height, weight, even history. Like it just, and I think I've done a little bit of reading about it that says it could be the same height and weight, and one person could blast it off of 5 milligram and one person could get blasted off of 50, you know?
Right. And I think that, like, you know, we'll start to study that more as things start to open up. And more, you know, the testing on edibles right now, I don't think that there's, you know, much, you know, too much being done, you know, probably like, you know, small state level stuff going on, but, you know, no, you know, big commission studies that are being done, just because it's just not, the mechanisms don't exist. And I think that they're starting to get better. You know, I know you had posted something the other day, you know, from last year about how just, at least with we're not going to be just growing the cannabis in Mississippi anymore. And we're able to research it. You know, people are going to be growing good cannabis up in Maine, you know, that they'll be actually be getting strains. People can actually start studying, you know, different strains of cannabis, which is, you know, will be super helpful for, you know, for actually having like real findings of what, you know, the chemical is actually doing to people.
Yeah, that's an interesting company that I don't know anything about them other than the articles I've read. I think I've heard of Mary Stem in Maine, but then they had the launch party at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, and they're setting up shop here in Brunswick, Maine, and it's run by the guy on their board used to be the executive CEO of Heinz, was it? Or no, Kraft.
Kraft, yeah, the kind of Kraft.
It's very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
Also, what a business model to literally have all your product bought by the federal government ahead of time.
Right.
For probably like, you know, what a government overpays for stuff. They're probably paying $10,000 a pound. You know?
Well, that's the next thing that I was going to say is, so like this is a negotiated contract with the federal government, and the prices per pound in Maine have halved. You know, last year they were good. You know, the pound that was being sold for, you know, $2,000 and, you know, $2,400 is now going for, you know, a grand, you know. And so that's just, you know, and that's going to keep getting worse. You know, the blood is in the water that way.
Yeah. No, I battle with like a lot of buddies of mine who actually are true good craft, really, really good farmers. I'm not. I can get a serviceable, decent product up, but I'm not a true awesome master grower. But, you know, argue with them, say, dude, I know you grow craft, but it's essentially a commodity at this point. Like, you have to adjust to market conditions a little bit. You can't hold hard at whatever crazy number, 2,600 a pound or whatever you're thinking in your head still. I mean, you can, if you get it, go for it. If you have guys that are paying that, go for it, but it's saturated.
Yeah, it's super saturated.
And if you're new, or if you're not connected to people in this industry who, you know, can help you out, or, I'm sitting on a lot of inventory that, you know, I might have to send into the traditional market or backdoor or get creative on. You know, a lot of these guys that don't come from the traditional cannabis market don't know how to get creative. And I'm not talking about committing fraud or anything like that. I'm talking about, like, you know, a lot of the people would be called, you know, you've probably seen memes of cannabis chads. They're not used to taking risk, like, at all. I mean, some, you know, inherit business risk, but, you know, a lot of people, not even me, people who are older who did this in the 70s, 80s, 90s, they were growing when they were looking at, you know, federal minimums and stuff. You know, they knew there was risk. They knew there was like a long shot. A lot of times with cannabis guys and marketing projects, you know, we'll do e-com stuff, and 9 times out of 10, they want to go high risk, high reward, which is what we recommend anyway in e-com and that kind of stuff. But more so than any industry, I can get cannabis guys to go high risk, high reward. And that's why it's nice. But when you have, because
they're guys, the OGs.
Sometimes, you know, everyone's calling themselves an OG now, you know, but the real, or even if you just did it in a traditional market, like, you know, I have a lot of respect for a guy doing this in like Mississippi, even still, and, you know, running a grow in Mississippi, because in certain parts of Mississippi, Texas, wherever, you know, they still care about that. I grew up in Travis County, where Austin is, but the county over from me is Williamson County, and that's a county where you'll go to jail for a joint in your pocket. You know, people, they're on that show a lot, live PD, and people, if they're getting chased out of Austin, they'll stop at the Williamson County line so they don't get in more trouble in that county. It's also the county that had the kid, maybe 10 years ago, got a national news story because this kid made hash brownies, but the cops in that town, or the Williamson County cops, weighed the entire contents of the brownies, like fudge brownies, so they're like whatever, 2-3 pounds, and said this kid had 2 or 3 pounds of hash each, So then he's looking at like 10 years, big deal. Normal got involved. I think it ended up going away, but yeah.
So that's where you grew up?
I grew up in Austin. That's a bumfuck county next to it.
How far distance?
Oh, it's the bordering county. It's 15 minutes away.
Okay, yeah.
And the sheriff in that county actually won the lottery. I want to say like he won like $50 million in like 2002, and he's still the sheriff. So he has his little fiefdom.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so what is Texas right now? They're medical.
They're very, very minimal medical. I think they just had what they're, air quotes, celebrating as a big victory of being able to increase to 0.05 or increase of 0.5 as far as their CBD products. So they're very far behind, but Texans and Texas they like money. So I don't think it will be as long as people think before that market opens up.
Well, I wonder about that, right? Like, cause like New Hampshire is the same way, right? And that's where we film the show. That's where we do the shows in New Hampshire. And like, Texas, like it's, what's going on? What's your opinion of that? Like, where, are New Hampshire and Texas the same that way?
I don't know much about like where, like I follow stuff in Augusta pretty, and that's part of the fun thing about being in Maine is you can follow local politics and get involved pretty easily, and make an impact. But I don't know about Texas, where they are with that. I mean, Oklahoma is, obviously borders Texas to the north and is going gangbusters. If people think the Maine market is unregulated, Oklahoma makes it look organized.
Really?
Oh yeah. Unlimited canopy, unlimited licensing, and, a few other factors I think that made it pretty significant overnight. And what's interesting about that is Oklahoma is extremely conservative, arguably backward state. I mean, you weren't allowed to get tattoos in Oklahoma until the early 2000s. Tattoos were banned. Literally, you can look that up. They had the 10 Commandments on the state house capitol, and then this state is the most liberal, let's send it weed state overnight. It was weird.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. But maybe, maybe they saw a need, they saw a need, they needed, money. They needed some money to come in, and that's, cannabis is a great way to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, you're already starting to see some of the grimier stuff that happens out west happen in Oklahoma. I mean, recently, there's a Chinese, all Chinese nationals were executed on a farm, grow there. They say like 1/4 to 1/5 of the grows in California are Chinese nationals. They're working at them. But Oklahoma will start getting, I think, more attention.
I think that was on a mushroom farm.
Yeah.
The execution is horrible.
Yeah. But the Chinese national, or a lot of them are Chinese and a lot of them Korean. I would go, when I was in California, I would meet with a lot of Koreans who were like very polite, but they're just very influential in the cannabis industry, particularly in like Northern California. But
how do you mean they were influenced?
Oh, they're just influential.
Oh, they're influential in the cannabis industry.
Like, you hear a lot about, the big cartel, 10,000 plant grows in California and the West Coast, but I saw more just farms of, 100 Chinese people working on them.
Run by Chinese people?
Korean mostly.
So it's a Korean-owned farm. Chinese people were working there.
Yeah, and they're super nice dudes, but you'd go in their office and they'd have like, an automatic Uzi.
Right.
And super polite, and they just get you what you need. And it was all, just all transactional. But
what were you doing in California? What were you doing in California with the Uzi guys?
Oh, well, guns, that's actually a funny thing you bring that up, because I just saw that big ruling about medical marijuana users and not owning firearms and all that.
Yeah.
I knew that rule's around, but I didn't know anyone actually abided by that.
Yeah, I mean, a medical card holder, you can't have a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that was allegedly.
Well, yeah, right.
But
allegedly.
Everyone in my circle, Maine cannabis, in my opinion, tends to veer, we're all pretty libertarian, I'd say.
Well, yeah, I mean, most people who are, they have their gun on them when they're doing their business. Most private caregivers.
I've been in, Portland's not a dangerous city. I've been in Baton Rouge and places where you will get mugged if you're walking home from the bar. But there's times in Portland when you're dropping off $40,000 worth of rec product for someone or something, and everyone knows they're medical marijuana because they've got rec marijuana because they got big blue metric tracking tags on them, and that's the system. A Brinks truck dropping off $20,000. They have 2 armed guards. Cannabis, you tell me I can't have a gun? I know guys that have crossbows and stuff to get away with that, but
right.
Honestly, every time I've been pulled over, and I always have a firearm on me, not right now, but the cops couldn't care less about my metric paperwork, my transfer tags, or my firearm at all.
Right.
And there's been times where I've actually been hyped because it's been organized, all ready to go, and couldn't care less.
Right. That's it's because it's unbelievable. So wait, because your metric tags, you're saying you're transporting.
Yeah. So in Maine, you don't need, it's a recommended trip ticket. Technically, you need a trip ticket.
A trip ticket, right? Yeah. So
which
you say metrics.
Only really became a thing in the last couple of years. Technically, when they first, a trip ticket used to be you could put a sticky note, going from here to here, slap it on your turkey bag, throw it in your trunk and go. Now we know they're a little more organized, and when we have drop-offs at the lab or certain people do trip tickets, especially if you're doing a wholesale order.
The businesses who are going to make it, who are going to be the people who make it through, are the people who are doing trip tickets.
Right.
The people who haven't adopted that and aren't doing it, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
Down the road, you need to start doing your trip tickets because regulation is coming to Maine Med. As much as rec is going to force that,
right?
Because we've already talked about it. They're getting beat up.
Yeah, trip tickets. The thing about trip tickets is they just stay in a filing cabinet in your office, and then if you do get maybe audited ever, I don't even know if they do paper audits of trip tickets. My one inspection I've ever had from OMP, which is now called something else,
OCP, yeah,
was early on in COVID, and it was a FaceTime Zoom where I walked around my grow with my camera facing out. And that was my inspection.
Right.
And at the time, I believe that was when rec was unrolling, and they didn't have hardly any inspectors.
Yeah,
and
sounds like it was COVID.
You'd see they had 3 or 4 titles. The guy would be a water inspector, building inspector, and then I guess on Thursdays he does cannabis inspections.
Right.
They seem to have gotten some of that worked out. Yeah, I've had firearm and weed on me probably every day of my life, since I was 18.
Right. The Texas man, I love it.
Well, Texas, actually, Maine has more lax firearm laws than Texas.
Yeah, no, I know. And New Hampshire's great too, but
no, I always, and it's kind of a corny cliche thing, but I would always be you've probably heard it, rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah. And I for me, I hear that, and I agree that guns should be we're a gun wielding country, and the people do need guns, and I think it's a good thing maybe one day that we do have guns, because the government that would be a good thing for people, and just to protect yourself. I think that there's a lot of crazy people out there. I do think that it needs to get better with the mental health screening, and just doing better on checking who we are giving guns to. I don't know the right answers to that necessarily, but I think we should probably figure that out. What do you think?
I'm kind of I own a decent amount of firearms, and they're cool to have, but not necessary for certain times.
Right.
At one point, I owned a Browning 50 caliber sniper rifle that I bought for $5,000 in 10s and 20s and 100s from this fine sportsman shop, hunter shop in Austin. I was with my buddy James, and these guys, I don't know if you've ever been in gun stores. A lot of them are kind of crusty, rude older guys, sportsmen.
Yeah, right.
And they're not like us, but that was cool to have. Much like my girlfriend doesn't need a $4,000 Gucci bag, but it's cool to have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my position on it. And I do think it's a mental health thing. I mean, I've lived in California where, you know, guns are banned, but guess what? You go across to Reno and all the pawn shops are buying guns and they don't sell them on display there. They're going to California. Like, you know, bombs are illegal. Drugs are illegal. People still shoot them up in Monument Square. So I don't believe that government making anything illegal, much like cannabis, will help anything.
Yeah, right.
And Maine in particular has the second lowest gun violence per capita, but the laxest gun laws in the country, arguably. Lowest gun violence, lowest murder rate, and highest gun ownership.
Yeah, that's Maine is for you though.
Same with Vermont.
It's people. Yeah, I'll explain it. It's the people. It's literally the people. They're good people, and they are respectful people, and they respect these weapons, and they like that's things. Man, I grew up not, I didn't grow up like you in terms of guns weren't around me. I
didn't grow up. My influence with guns is my family's not like hunters.
Okay,
my uncle and my grandfather were big hunters, and my uncle passed away, so I inherited a lot of firearms. So I'm not like, I wouldn't call myself, I appreciate firearms, I have a lot of them, but I'm not like a sportsman myself, really.
Okay, yeah, no,
I dove hunt, that's about it.
Okay, cool. So I've never hunted. And I would like to do that though. I would like to hunt, and I would like to go out there and take my own animal, and I'm a spiritual person, so I would do it in likely a different way than other people. My partner said to me earlier, that he wouldn't mind. He's an apex predator, and he would just go into the field and cut a steak right out of a cow. Right then, I'm thinking like, I'll still eat the steak, but like I'm gonna I'm gonna properly send this thank this animal and send this animal to the afterlife and thank you for the energy that it's giving me, and I'm gonna not just do it with an X-Acto knife in the field.
Oh yeah, no. If I were to go on a elk hunting trip with a buddy or something, I do go with guys who are true sportsmen and, use the whole part of the animal, and whatever they don't use. I know a guy that goes, got a bear lottery ticket, and, he donated the unused portion to, I think, a reservation or something. So, I like when it gets used. Yeah, man. Likes when it has to get used. Like that's literally like food's a problem in this world. And if we're literally trying to help people be well, like that's a way we should be doing it. And if it's a way we can feed our communities too, like sure, like I know, my fiance is from Vermont, like upstate Vermont, and a lot of her, neighbors and a lot of people who own farms up there, like they're strictly eating venison during the winter season, because they got their tags and they took their deer, and then it's going to feed their family. And like, I think that's a giddy up. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a lot like Vermont's, it doesn't have a coast, but it's similar to Maine as far as like, I don't know if I've heard Portland or, York County up to Portland, at least on the coast, that's not Maine, that's northern Massachusetts. Yeah. And they call it the Volvo line. Like right about Brunswick down. Yeah, I hear that. And it's like, and it is a different world. It's a different world. The seacoast area of Maine is definitely a different world. And the population and is so inhabited by people from Massachusetts is true. I'm from Massachusetts, and I used to be like really proud from being from Massachusetts. Then I moved to New Hampshire, and then moved to Maine, and I've become less proud of being from Massachusetts. What cracks me up about you guys from Mass is you come up to Maine, and then you'll be like, oh man, I left my whole family, everything I knew behind 90 miles down the highway, and they act like they just moved to Thailand. Yeah. Like, it's so cold up here. I'm like, dude, you're 90 miles up north. What are you talking about? Like, right, yeah. You're from like Brockton. You're not that far. Brockton, right. I grew up in Easton, which is literally right next door. Yeah. But yeah, so Maine's just so, I mean, that's the thing. Like, he had me thinking about guns, like totally different crowd, like just 20 miles inland from the coast, Yeah, no, for sure. And that's like, because like the governments are obviously, the town governments, local governments, county governments are run by, people who are influencing them, all the money that's coming up here from Massachusetts, and the people who are living in the whoses, who've retired up here, or who have summer houses up here, or both, who, have now started to own businesses up here. Like they're different than the traditional Mainer, and it's funny, I have a lot of friends who, grew up, Mainer friends who have grown up there forever. And they say it's funny because like the
Massachusetts people, they come up every summer and they look at the Mainers like we're, like the hillbillies, like, and just, service, like give me service and all that, all this stuff. But it's like they're just dumping money into the economy, which is good, for Maine people, especially young kids who take advantage of some of those jobs in the summertime and can really make some money, So that's the story who I'm referring to.
Oh yeah, no, and that just makes me think about, earlier in the pod I said, I think, Maine Medical is positioned well for a long time. There was some changes in the rulemaking that, I don't know the exact specifics of, but essentially any changes, they have to go through as if an actual bill. Before, I believe it was more along the lines of if a change wanted to come to medical marijuana policy, medical cannabis policy, it would go through the committee and you could kind of do it in a few meetings. Now any big changes have to be voted on in the Maine legislature. So it's a big ordeal to change anything.
Yeah. So like testing and stuff like that would be really hard to change now.
I believe it. I might be giving a very simple layman's explanation of it, but I believe before the committee got together and had a few meetings and voted on implementing testing.
Yeah.
Now that has to go through a state house vote. It has to pass, I believe, and I can clarify that, but I believe that's how it is. So that was big, and a lot of the committee that oversees Maine medical cannabis is the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee, which traditionally, in my opinion, a lot of people might not think are cannabis friendly, but veterans are actually one of the biggest users and benefits of cannabis.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I don't see the Veterans and Legal Affairs opinion or a committee coming in and making any big radical changes to small and popped Maine-owned businesses that are very much helping veterans in favor of Curaleaf, of a big MSO with a lobbyist, because Maine is so grassroots that they won't win an election again. There's 1.4 million people in Maine.
Yep.
Over, I think, 114,000 medical card holders.
Yep.
So what's that? 1 in 14, 1 in 30, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Someone told me earlier.
That's a significant amount of people.
Yeah. Someone told me earlier that caregivers and Maine medical card holders make up 10% of the Maine population.
And think about that. That's just not people who are like, oh, cannabis is fun. Oh, I smoke a joint occasionally. That's people who took time to go get a medical. I mean, it's easy. You can do it online or it takes 10 minutes, but still, they took time to go get a medical cannabis card. They're into weed. They're into cannabis. They're going to be smoking it, Same with you. I don't know if you saw the cannabis numbers was being touted, or the caregiver numbers were down, from roughly, I think, 3,200 down to maybe like 2,200 or something. Well, that's skewed too because caregiver assistants are a new thing. Before, everyone had to be a caregiver. If this was a Maine medical business, you had to be a caregiver. You had to be a caregiver.
Right. Yeah.
Now you can just be the caregiver with 5 caregiver assistants.
Yep.
So obviously the caregiver numbers went down.
Right. I wonder what that caregiver assistance number is. I bet it's ginormous.
I mean, that's pretty significant too. I mean, it's on the report that came out from OMP. OCP. Yeah, that's going to be a long one.
Yeah.
And that,
but you want to know what though? I don't hate it, because like marijuana, like is, it's a term that like is, you're a marketing guy, you're a branding guy, you understand it. It's like, that's why I don't necessarily want to call, it's fun to call it weed, call it, dope, marijuana, whatever, but it's like, it's cannabis and we need to call it cannabis because that's what you call a chemical entity, that's going to help people and that is going to be studied. And just to have a new branding around it. This is what we talk about. And I just think it's important. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just positioning your brand from the jump of where you want it to be, like an approachable, who's your user, I mean, a craft brewery doesn't open and say, oh, we're just going for beer drinkers. They go for a guy who like, oh, I love farmhouse ales and we're going to brew an awesome one of those, Mm-hmm. Or they pick a market, you pick your target market, and a lot of these people who, and I don't even know if we're going to see this big drop off of businesses failing. You'll see some, you'll see ones going longer that they should have because they have investor money or other stuff, but med or rec.
Med.
Yeah. I think you could be right about med. I think med, they're not as many rec is where there's going to be more of the bloodbath because there's the med people who are already being successful have been doing it for a while, right? And they have their bases.
And I know a few who have, their pending license or preliminary license for rec, and just to kind of hold it and see where it shakes out,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew a lot, the market's kind of floating down now, but there's this first wave of people that opened up, and those will flush out, and you're already seeing there's a few real estate accounts in Maine that do a lot of cannabis. You see a lot of turnkey ready grows, ready to go now, kitchens, all this stuff. And this is just the second wave. But, the people that have been in the legacy market for a while will continue to make the best product, because even the people who hire the best people, they're not going to care enough. You can't hire a master grower and not give him equity of that company and expect him to put the passion that he would have growing his own micro grow, ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, right.
Especially when you start, if, say you do get a golden opportunity and, a big company wants to pay you $500,000 a year to run a massive grow. You're not growing anymore. You're just following, a massive SOP. You go to your bosses and you're just going in whatever direction it goes for profit.
Yeah, right. The profit matters the most.
Yeah. Hey, boss, this plant is the best one we have, best structure, best feedback from patients. We should definitely go with that. The yield's 5% lower, though. No way would that one go with a lot of these big ones. And that's why, it's quickly showing through the quality, which is why they're not working. And I don't like a lot of companies in rec. I love a few of them, the smaller local ones, but even the larger ones would be okay, I think, in the market business-wise, if they had decent product, but they just can't put anything out.
The rec market, you're saying?
For the most part.
Yeah.
There's a few
the vertically integrated ones.
Lodestar, I know of Hazy Hill Goes Rec, a few that are really good and their flower comes out good. And there's just a few that just are unremarkable.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But Lodestar was one good example. They were in rec, they were in med, a good reputation. And then, I see them in rec and I know the name for med. I know that they're growers first. I know that they, I know background about them enough to know that they have industry experience to put a good product out. Yeah. So when I see that in rec, I'm like all day long. Mm-hmm. It's the guys, like I was saying, I don't know.
East Coast cannabis guys, same type of deal. You feel that way about them too?
I don't know them that well. But they seem to be, same
type of deal. They went, they were medical, and then, they figured out medical, and then they made the jump to rec, and they stuck it out. That was not an easy jump for people to make, man, because of the government, made it very tough. Maine rec passed in 2016, and it didn't, 2018, and the stores didn't open in 2016 or 18, and then I know stores didn't open until 2020, October 2020.
Yeah, I mean, Portland, I speak a lot on Portland. I know Portland made it really tough. There's a few big players in the beginning of the industry that made it tough for other people. There was, lawyers writing, there were people in charge of drafting the language on the marijuana laws or cannabis laws that, had interest in cannabis labs in Maine and would be writing code saying this township cannot have any of these type of labs. Meanwhile, you own one in a township over.
Yeah. There was a lot of corruption with everything,
Maine
right?
is the most, in a way it's good. You used to be able to call OCP and Ginger or whatever would pick up the phone and you could check on your application or your file and it was nice and small, but it's a small state. You can influence things pretty significantly. If you and your cousin get on a local planning board, you can zone away in some jurisdictions in Maine. It's actually very interesting coming from a state like Texas and California of how quickly
the zoning
have a little influence.
So the marijuana cannabis name is also our producer just told us that it's actually rooted in racism as well, to kind of shun the Mexican the Mexican people because they were bringing to write the story that they were bringing it into the country and that they were the problem. And obviously the cartels were bringing it into the country, but that's a greater problem because it was illegal in this country because of hemp and rope, but whatever. So William Randolph Hearst, was the one who did that with marijuana. And so I think cannabis is is a good, a good term that we use for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So zoning. So these, it's like almost like a zoning board. And I know that there's a lot of this in Maine and I would say New Hampshire too. Maybe it's places that where the population is not super robust, but you find these people, like you said, two brothers, two cousins, they get on a zoning board together, and they make a few, rules, and then, they have some money, and they can really control what, the narrative of what happens in a town or a township.
I mean, you really can, particularly in towns where, you'll see a 5-person zoning board with 3 open spots, and it takes you and 2 other cannabis interested people to get on that board. And yeah, most of the time you're dealing with old people, complaining about being denied for a garage extension or something like that. But, in a larger picture, you can zone things in your best interest. If you do have plans for a storefront, or if you do have plans for something like that, particularly in, a few towns come to mind, Gray, Maine, a few others that are not the most friendly cannabis wise, that are just right. And then even on top of that, like just, Maine traditionally, it was, set up as a low barrier of entry, and it should always be like that, to be able to have, a caregiver live on your property in a pop-up, and he's covered because that's his residence. Or, you make your 3 roommates caregivers, and their roommates or family members who are caregivers, who are, there's a lot of exemptions and a lot of ways you get flexible with it, and stack licenses and that kind of stuff. I mean, when I came into caregiving, when it was 5 patients or whatever, 6 patients, and, you were my patient for 30 minutes during our transaction, and then after that, you weren't my patient. I believe I just missed the gifting days of, when you would buy a t-shirt from me, and with the t-shirt came a free ounce of marijuana. That was a lot of the legal loopholes you'd have to go to. But at the same time, in Maine, it wasn't like, even if I wasn't doing the right paperwork, or I wasn't doing this in, Louisiana, if I got caught, is a cop really going to pursue this, for take it away from me, write me a ticket? Like, I'm not going to jail over it, And that happens more often than not, I found, with law enforcement. I've obviously been to jail minorly for a few days here and there, but, I've had cops tell me to, do you want a felony, or do you want to stuff this mushroom in the puddle of mud over there, like a pound of mushroom kind of thing? I'll be like, I'll do the second thing, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I never worried about, even shipping weed in the mail traditionally, which I haven't done in a while. Federal government is, call from a postal inspector, postmaster general. It comes from like unknown or government number or something. It's never fun. And it's basically equivalent of like a cop taking your weed and saying, get out of here, kid. Like, don't do it again. I found that like anything between like 5 and 10 pounds, like they don't care about. If you're shipping like 50, 100 and something, they care. But the reason it became really easy, in my opinion, to ship and always use USPS was because a couple of years ago, the U.S. Postal Service did this initiative where if any employee identified drugs in packages, they got a large amount of money. I want to say like $10,000-$20,000. So it just created a real glut of packages that were suspicious, because I would do the same thing. I'd say, yeah, all this looks suspicious, and maybe as one gets weed in it, I'll get 10 grand. So that was the thing for a while, and then they backed off on that completely. And they seem to, in the airport, it seems to be okay now. Like, even if you're flying to a non-legal state, like TSA couldn't care less, even if you have like an ounce or 2 of concentrate on you. And I found that interesting, because even a couple of years ago, I'd still, I know I wouldn't get in trouble, but rather than getting even taken, I'd, put a few ounces of rosin or a few grams of rosin or concentrate in my BOP kit, blend it in with the toiletries, make it creative. Now, if I'm going away for Christmas, I'll bring, 100 gummies and
throw them right in there.
Throw them right in there. The stuff, the same, stuff that's still a felony in a lot of states, or, big deal. I guess technically a federal crime, since I'm going over state lines with it.
Right. No, I hear that, and it's funny, because I think everybody who smokes cannabis or is a cannabis user, edibles, whatever, has had that experience when they're flying. I will say that we probably have those. I've had those experiences. I've had really, really negative experiences with law enforcement as well. But also, like, I've had a lot of those experiences as well with law enforcement where it's like, just, don't be stupid, more so when I was young and stuff, probably, like what you're talking about. I will say that, like we do have a privilege. We're white males, and I think that is definitely something. It's definitely something. It's wild. I had a friend, and not to get too off topic. Well, actually, we'll do an episode on this for sure, because his family is just literally helping communities be well for sure. But a gentleman that I played football with, and throughout my youth and then into high school, he before this whole thing became a thing where cops were killing black kids. My buddy who never, this kid never drank, never did anything wrong. He was like the most upstanding citizen. This kid, DJ Henry, just awesome, like across the board, fucking awesome. And he got gunned down one night, by a police officer. And there was a big trial about it, and the police lied and tried to do all this crazy bullshit. And to see that I always had I always had the opinion that I knew that I had privilege, but when that happened, it was just like, it just solidified everything for me. It's like that this kid that was, just as good of a human being as I was, not, and like to know that I had done the same things that he had done, that this cop told him to move his car, and he moved his car because he was trying to, do what the cop said. He was probably nervous. He had friends who were drinking, whatever. And then he got shot, and then he died because they handcuffed him, and he died, bled out on the on the pavement. And it's like, so there is we do have a privilege.
Yeah, no, I'm just as perplexed by people who are like ACAB, abolish the police people, as I am with people who have like thin blue line flags. Like, I don't love the cops or hate the cops.
Right, like, cops are necessary, and they just need to do their jobs. I guess I generally
skew, like, I don't really care for them, all things being equal, but I don't have a hard opinion either way. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they see that in Portland. I see that in everywhere all the time. Like, I see it like stickers on cars in Maine that are like, Mainers against elder abuse. And in my head, I'm like, who's for elder abuse? Just that kind of stuff. Like, I see it all the time in Portland. I mean, I'm, walking, like I said, I go from the West End to Monument Square every day. So I see every friggin' protest. And every Friday, there's the guy with the microphone out front of Planned Parenthood and counter protesters. And I've told every protesting group down there, if they ask, like, I'm neutral to your cause. I'm just pro-quiet at this point in Portland. Like,
yeah,
at this point, like it's pretty wild. But then
I'm pro discussion.
I'm pro. Yes.
Yeah. I'm pro. Let's sit down and let's have a nice, honest discussion, and let's try to figure out what's best for everybody, and what works for everybody. And, truly, I know some of these things that, some of the moral issues, I don't know if they're, the sides are so polarized that I don't know if there can ever be, true cohesiveness, but like, we have to at least not be just having protesters and counter protesters, just like, let's stop screaming at each other and let's sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah. It's a lot of screaming, and most of the time when people are screaming, they don't know what they're talking about, or they lost the room, or, you've seen the memes of like, after Trump was elected, like the lady in glasses, like yelling at the sky, like, what are we doing?
Right.
But not many people want to have discourse. Like, many people want to just tell you why you're wrong, why I'm right. And that's why I feel like, especially with all the social progressive stuff that's been happening, like, I don't know how many minds are being changed rather than people are just keeping their opinions to themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And like
what made me think about that actually was, not to get totally off topic, we kind of are, but White Lotus. Did you guys watch that?
I haven't, but I know the premise.
Yeah. I mean, the wealthy lady's getting grilled by her daughter's friend about, her privilege. And she's like, oh, like, well, let's just give away all our money. Like, let's just, all right. Like, oh yeah, we'll cede our power, like, so I don't know. I see it in Portland. The point is I see every issue of both sides walking to work every day in Portland. And I just always think about, man, people are really fired up about that. And then my second thought is like, don't these people like have lives, particularly the people yelling at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah.
Don't they have jobs?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, man. Is it's such a polarizing issue for them, and a lot of these people have been some have been so affected by it, that they just that's all they can do, and that's what's hard about it. Is like, I only know this because I go through it myself. That you have this emotion, then your emotion takes over, and then you lose all logic and all everything, and that can spitball on top of itself. And like, these people might be arguing a logic thing, they might be protesting for a logical thing, but they're not, they're being illogical in it because they're not making any progress. Maybe they are making progress. Maybe it's awesome. But if, in the example that you're saying, like, they're just, being kind of, out there and just doing their thing and not making any progress, and that's obviously not good either.
Or being peer pressured. Like, Portland High School every other week has a climate walkout.
Yeah.
I mean, how many kids care about climate? How many kids will care about missing fourth period?
Right.
Or do you feel pressured to do that? Like, I care about climate change, like, I want to address that. But like, if I was 16 and everyone else was going out, I'd go out.
Yeah, dude, that's a worrisome, man. That's really worrisome. The group think.
Oh, sorry.
No, get in
You
there.
made me think of conversation. I always like to say, because I'm pretty, I'd say libertarian, moderate. Like, I'm unaffiliated politically. Like, I'm not a registered Republican or Democrat, but I always like to say, like, man, if the conservatives said, okay, we'll give up AR-15s if the left, you give up late-term abortion, real compromise, but they would never do that. Both sides' heads would explode,
Right.
But until that happens, like, real compromise will really never happen in this country. Just, things tend to go, 8 years right with Bush, swings back left, 8 years Obama, 4 with Trump, might have 4 with, so on and so forth. So I think it always tends to swing back, but.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, all I really care about is just like making sure that the youth has the best chance to become the best versions of themselves. Like whatever that means, like we just need to provide that for them, and like getting them to get excited about the climate, I think is good, because it does need to be changed. It does need to be worked on. We need to, but scaring them and having it at 4, every second, they're walking out and at fourth period, like, that's going to cause fear and peer pressure fear, and not everyone's going to be educated about it because they're just following their friends.
Right.
It definitely is going to create problems, I think.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the PR reputation of government scientists is right now either, after COVID. After that whole, with no one quite knowing what that was and us being told what it was and what it was going to do. And now we're supposed to listen to the government's guidance on this scientific issue.
Yeah, good luck.
Part of me is like, oh, I'm sure the government has their top minds on it.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, that's really foolish of me to say.
Right.
But, I also fall into the fallacy of, remember in elementary school, like, Boston Harbor was going to be underwater by 2015, so you'd see different models and stuff. Maine, as bad as climate change is going to be for a lot of, third world countries, places where it's along the equator, Maine and New England's positioned really well in the next 10 to 50 years.
Yeah, no.
Maine's a few temperature degrees away from being able to grow peaches.
Right. Yeah. Maine's a great place to be, for sure. And it's only 1.4 million people right now, but that number is probably going to change, going to change in the future, for sure.
And this is one you might spot check, but I'm pretty sure it's been gone up 1 degree a decade since 1975. Since 1975, the average temperature is up 5 degrees. So climate change, especially with climate change, AI, being able to work everywhere, Maine, Southern New Hampshire, the next 10, 50 years, I think is great.
Yeah, that's where I want to be.
Because, think about it too. But obviously, winters will be lesser. There'll be more winters like what we had this winter. Mm-hmm. Longer summers.
Yeah, it's ideal, and that's kind of like what the, like, there's a lot to talk about with the climate, because there's just so much to unpack there, and that's a whole nother episode in itself. You could
do a whole episode on packaging in the cannabis industry, because God, we're one of the biggest polluters.
Yeah, the packaging. A lot of plastic,
plastic.
Yeah, Dr. BeeWell doesn't use that. We use compostable lids, backyard compostable lids with glass jars that can be recycled. Literally, you can throw these suckers in the backyard, and they're gonna go into your garden. It's gonna be a benefit. So yeah, that's what we're all about.
I was more green when I was recycling cigarette cellophane and putting your eighth into that and sealing it up and giving it back to you. At least I was repurposing then. Now you're just getting Mylars.
Right. And that was the thing is like, I mean, you showed me something really cool earlier that it's going to give people access to single doses. And I thought that was really, really cool. But my head did think, oh shit, that's a lot of packaging for 10 milligrams, And
well, that's these industry regulations come in hard.
Yep.
And it doesn't really coincide with being green when they say it has to be child locked and this, and this. And then before you know it, you have this packaging that went from 10 cents to $3 a unit. And
right.
It's me proof. I get child proof stuff that I can't get open half the time.
Right. Yeah.
And, they can change that a lot. I think a company in Maine got in trouble for having a mermaid. It's actually a pretty funny story. A company called Seaweed hired an attorney who also wrote the laws for the state of Maine and helped write those. Their attorney wrote all the laws, and then they got like a $10,000 fine for having a mermaid or an animal, mythical creature.
Yeah.
And they had to pull all their packaging, basically scratch it all off. And now they're talking about making it even more strict as far as having no cartoon logos.
Yeah, no cartoon logos. I saw that.
Which is fine.
Probably good. But I know you want to, I saw a good point, like a good, I agree. That's probably good. But then like when you think of the counterpoint, it's like, no, is what needs to happen is if adults in a house or in any situation is using cannabis, they need to know how to properly store it and make sure that their children are not ever getting near it. Yeah, my life has changed. I have a 4-month-old now. Do you think my cannabis habits have stayed the same as they were last 6 months ago? No, they've absolutely changed. And my son, he can't do anything now. He can't walk. He can't do anything. He can goo goo gaga, and like, I still have that stuff hidden, in a locked with a key that only I have, because like, it's probably something that I need to get used to, because that's going to be the case, because I'm going to have, children in my house. And that's what we do with guns, because that's what, this is something that can hurt these children. And we need to, so like the packaging is not going to matter. If a kid finds gummies, they're going to eat the gummies. It doesn't matter about the packaging, like the cartoons, like, yeah, sure, we shouldn't entice it, because, then there's, you want risk reduction. That's like what we want. And so like, if those parents, we have to assume that there is going to be a lot of stupid parents being, getting high and being irresponsible. So they are going to do that. So like, maybe it might help the kid if there's no cartoon. They're probably still going to eat the candy, but maybe a few kids don't do it because they only like cartoon candy, so we should be doing stuff like this. And that's what the government and that's what it's there for safety reasons. But at the same time, it's like the parents and the people who are using and being around this are the ones who really need to take responsibility. You need to be a responsible user, just like you were with alcohol. Like, kids have been stealing booze. We were stealing booze when we were kids. Like, the good, some parents were really good at it, at hiding it. And some parents were really, really bad at hiding it,
Oh, you see, that was the point I was going to make is we're not hiding. My parents had a bar and, above the fridge, and the Patron frozen or silver was in the freezer. Right. But I just knew like that was my parents' alcohol. Don't drink. I mean, obviously when I was older, I would take some, but like, right. Does everyone who has a freezer or a fridge of beer in their garage have a lock on it if they have a kid under 18 in the house? Like, that's what I don't get about the cannabis packaging with kids. Young kids, yeah. Like, 5 toddlers eating it, but like, why is it on the company to protect,
yeah, right.
Does every cleaning product have a safety lock on it? Does the bleach have it? If my 9-year-old goes under my sink that I don't have locked, I don't have a 9-year-old, but you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Like, where do we draw the line here?
Right.
Like,
no, I agree.
It's residual from the tobacco BS.
Yeah.
So because they can't have Joe Camel, can't have the Marlboro Man. So they're basically just retroactively going, yeah, and since we did that with these guys, you got to do it with these guys too. Not taking into account that they literally marketed to children for 70 years.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, Jewel, you can't put any, cartoons on your product, but the way that they're marketing, it's like to kids.
Well, yeah, I don't know if like we're on camera or not, but like this is the Nick vape.
Yep.
This is a cherry cola, Lost Mary. This is nicotine. They have flavors like Tutti Frutti. They have other ones that are called raves that light up different colors. And it's, I think my favorite, I've gotten a frickin' Shirley Temple flavored vape.
Yeah, right.
Definitely
marketed to kids.
If you were a 15-year-old girl, like, yeah, that looks appealing,
Right.
And you're allowed to because it's synthetic Chinese nicotine, but the plant that you grew at home in Maine, you can't market that way. But there is a lot of stuff that Maine Medical has been not getting away with, but the thing about Maine Medical is you have a caregiver, a Maine Medical producer can be me with 6 plants in my basement, or it can be me in a massive warehouse, best automated grow in the world. There's not really a craft category. And I believe in like Michigan and some other states, there's a craft tier or like a cottage industry kind of tier.
Yep.
Where you can get, I think in Mass too, there's a micro license.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something like that maybe long-term would be good for Maine.
Yeah.
But
for the rec, for just like to get into the rec market, or for med. Yeah. I think that should like be separate of a caregiver to have it more separated out.
Yeah, because say if there's, let's just go with the old number. If there's 3,000 caregivers, how many of those are actual storefronts and not actual storefronts? How many of those are actual businesses? How much of those, are guys just, just growing,
I would say it's probably like there's probably only of the 3,000's the number. It's 200 are storefronts, and then there's 2,000 growers, and then I'd say maybe 1,500 growers who are caregivers, and then the other ones are just middlemen who are in between and finding their niche, maybe product manufacturers, different whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's probably about right. But there is a lot of people that just, I think, are making good money, but it's I think possibly more like a hobby that's making really good money.
Yeah, that's definitely for a lot of people of where it was, and I think that it's being harder. That hobby is getting harder for people. So the people who aren't taking it as serious as a business, I think that those are the people who are realizing like, shoot, my hobby is getting, and a lot of those people don't look at it as a hobby. They look at it as like, that's a nice cash, it's nice cash, nice cash inflow, nice cash stream for me.
Yeah, or even as simple of, am I investing, my profit off this round back into the business, or am I buying 2 new jet skis? That
right.
kind of thing. Because, forever, it was, I can, I pay everything in cash and I have every toy and, I have all the fun stuff, but like on paper, I can't buy a house because of this money's, from cannabis, that kind of thing, which you still deal with actually in cannabis. Some banks in Maine, even some credit unions, if you even are employed by a cannabis company, you'll have trouble with mortgages because of the federal aspect of it. But I don't know. I don't know how long, like I keep saying, the attractiveness of Maine rec is going to be for outside people. And that's when I think people like, companies like you and the Maine brands or the New England brands will do well there. Right.
And that's my hope. That's the obviously where I see the industry going, as well. So we're definitely in agreement there. So so just to touch base on a few things with you. So you've been in cannabis forever, right? Like, so it's always been a part of your life.
Yeah, it's always been a part of my life. I've been smoking since I was 12, 13.
Yeah. When did you start? Because you were in software originally in Austin, and then you didn't really start getting into the cannabis till you got up here. Is that correct?
I had gone through like 3 colleges, and then I played college football in Ohio, bounced around, went to North Carolina, then came back to Texas, and I was like trying to finish up college and just got a random job at Apple corporate. Total chance opportunity. They have like about 8,000 people at that campus, and a guy I knew worked there and he hooked it up. And that's kind of how I got into tech. And Austin's a kind of town where, you could work for Apple for a year, then hop to Samsung, Google, all the big techs there. So kind of like Boston, you could go sell SaaS software at different places. But I ended up moving to Maine, partially to caregive and partially because of the woman I was dating at the time, and just ended up staying. And I mean, I was familiar with Maine. I had lived in southern New Hampshire till I was 9 or 10, the year Tom Brady became the Pats quarterback. And I had gone to a Gonkwit in the summertime. So I was familiar with Maine. So once I got back up here.
You were 11 because it was 2001.
Yeah. Yeah. I was 92.
Oh, no, you're 92.
So I was my
11.
Age.
I was thinking my age. I was 11.
Yeah, but I remember the game I was
watching. We were talking about our ages earlier.
I was a big Drew Bledsoe fan because I was Drew, so Drew Bledsoe.
Oh, yeah.
All that. Ty Law, Lori Malloy, the law firm, like that Pat's team was great.
Yeah.
But once I got back to Maine, I just liked it.
Yeah, man. So girls,
sucked,
you know, I got dragged here by a girl, and you know, I didn't want to come. I didn't want to. You know, she lived in Portsmouth. I didn't want to come, and I moved here. And like after the first week, I was just like, whoa, this is a really cool place. Like what we were just talking about. You know, people definitely want to be here, and it's gonna keep getting more and more popular every single day.
Oh yeah, it's getting really popular. It's a really, really good place to work. Like the next 20 years or so is going to be a really good place to be, is if you work with your hands, skilled trades. Like, God, I kick myself for not learning HVAC, any of that kind of stuff. I have a friend who's a union elevator guy out of Boston. His rates are crazy. Yeah,
my brother does industrial refrigeration. You know, so he works so hard, but you know he can do really well. You know, same as someone who went to school for 6 years to get a doctorate degree in pharmacy. You know, my brother can out-earn them, you know?
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. But, you know, a lot of the businesses, like what it seems like what you guys have here is at least have someone or two people on staff that know how to build out a grow, have some sort of, you know, carpentry skill and can be an asset to the business. And then you're not hiring, you know, subcontractor.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing about Maine, too. And that's why I was so successful is that that's what Maine is made up of, is people who can do things with their hands, and it's a giddy up. You know, they built all this stuff. You know, they built all these grows. They built them. You know, and that's a kind of a cool thing that I always have nostalgia about.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the reason Maine has been able to flourish as a cannabis destination is lack of regulation. I mean, there's nothing better about the soil or the sunlight or the climate in Northern California, Humboldt County, Mendo, anywhere like that. It's just rural and it's hard to get to, and it's harder to enforce than if you're growing in a valley or LA Valley. Like, same with Maine. So we were able to flourish here with like little government interaction. We've had this awesome medical program since '99 that has been hands off. And, you know, there's a big debate on like whether LePage was pro-cannabis or anti-cannabis, whether Janet Mills is pro or anti-cannabis. LePage was pretty laissez-faire. He let that thing sit on his desk, didn't sign it either way. Janet Mills kind of seems the same way, hasn't made any big moves either way. So I think the state of Maine government-wise is kind of just letting it clip along. They're going to want that tax revenue, but they're getting it from Met, you know?
Right.
They're getting a decent amount of tax revenue, and it employs a lot of Mainers.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, I mean, it surpassed fishing and lobstering as the number one, you know, industry, you know,
yeah,
in Maine by like a lot, like hundreds of %.
I know the lobstermen recently had some sort of reprieve, but I don't know if you know all about that right whale situation in Maine and the lobster getting shut down, essentially. Well,
no.
Maine's battling, the lobstermen are battling their livelihood. You know, cannabis at times thinks we're battling our livelihood as far as smaller operations go.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time to be in Maine.
Yeah, for sure.
And is the state going to be able to, you know, if God forbid big cannabis does steamroll the state or the lobster industry goes away, are they going to be able to replace those jobs? Because based on all the empty mills in Lewiston and Sanford from, you know, 1975 to recently, didn't look like they did a great job of replacing those lost jobs. So
right,
somewhat terrifying, but there should be enough people moving to Maine to supplement that.
And you know different people moving in, so then you have different innovation and you know, just different minds melding. Same thing as anyone going, you know, anywhere. So I think that is a, you know, it's worrisome. You know, there's going to be a cool future. I think that you have a really, really neat perspective, you know, into the industry. You know, you're very well versed in, you know, the politics of kind of how cannabis has, you know, cannabis has taken off in the state, or has cannabis has formed. You know, I definitely, like, I think that we're going to have you back on the show for sure. Like, to talk about, you know, some more of the stuff, especially like when legislative stuff comes in. You seem like you're plugged in with, you know, a lot of the major players in the state and, you know, up there in Portland. So today was like really, really awesome.
Yeah,
I
really appreciate you guys having me on. Yeah, I know a lot of really interesting people too that, you know, whether it's from a marketing and branding perspective, or I have a friend who actually, you know, just got done signing up to be a lobbyist and is in Augusta, and actually is recently, I think this week, was actually testifying for New Hampshire patient rights home grow.
Yeah, that's
Concord.
Yeah, it's coming. The home grow, the bill that's what's going on in New Hampshire right now. Is they're trying to push it through now so that people can grow 21 and older can grow their 6 plants at home.
Yeah, and what I think New Hampshire is going to see is what I was kind of talking about, Maine being very unique with a good grassroots. The city of Portland is totally controlled by a very left, almost socialist, Democratic Socialist Party of Maine controls Portland. Because in small elections, if you get a base of 800 people out voting, you win school boards, you win that kind of stuff.
Right.
And if you get 20 medical users to show up to a normal town zoning board or a hearing in State House in New Hampshire that normally has 1 reporter and 2 people, if 30 people are there, it somehow, and no, it sounds crazy, somehow it does influence.
Right.
If this local legislator who never has an email opens up and somehow has 400 one day, it does make them think. They're human,
Yeah.
And they might read one email, maybe their aide reads it or whatever, but
right.
It is enough people who care in the state about cannabis in New Hampshire to like make impact and have some recourse against the Goliaths,
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have like you and him come on the show together.
Yeah, no, he'd be a good guy to talk to you about zoning too.
Okay, yeah, I would love to get him on to explain. That's a fascinating conversation. Lobbying in Maine, like we talk about it all the time, but like we don't actually, the inner work to talk about the inner workings of that would be.
Yeah, he'd be fascinating. I mean, I need to meet up with him too because I want to pick his brain. I haven't seen him in a while, but he's one that he'll on his Instagram say, "Getting high with cats." If you want to give him a follow, this is easy. Here's how to go to this website, sign up as a lobbyist so you can register and sit on these things that you can't, so you can have this influence,
Yeah. That's a good thing that we'd like to teach people. If we're, like I said, the show is about helping, individuals, the community and society as a whole be well. And like, that's what this is, every conversation that I try to have with people is just to educate people on that. And I don't know everything, I don't even know a lot, but I like to conversate with people and try to figure things out. And, today I think you shed some great light on different things that are happening, within Maine, within, medical, within rec. And it's been really awesome to talk to you.
Oh yeah. No, I really appreciate it. And yeah, just remember in Maine, like they're fiercely provincial people. So like there will be interesting battles ahead, I think, in rec, but I think Maine will kind of stay the way it always has been. It's very resistant to change.
Yep.
But
maybe that's changing because they were resistant to the change and it was coming and they did change with the cannabis, so I think, I don't know, maybe the Mainers are going to surprise people. I think that could be the case. It's
going to be interesting. I mean, the population swing, it's the oldest state in the union, I believe, maybe 48 per capita. And also, I believe, other than Alaska, has the
oldest age population.
Oldest age, yeah, per average, and then lowest religious adherence.
Yeah.
Other than, I believe, maybe Oregon or something.
Right. Okay. Well, that's why we're one day Dr. BeeWell is going to be starting these cool, holistic health centers for elderly people, for where they can come and smoke cannabis and they can do psilocybin and they can giddy that up. And that is actually one thing that I wanted to, one thing you're plugged in, psilocybin is coming big time. Yeah. It's got voted on last year. It got voted down, but it's going to, it's coming again this year. What's your take on that? What are you hearing on the streets in Portland?
There's still a cannabis stigma that people are battling for some reason. I don't know if it's just my Instagram feed or my circle, but mushrooms are cool.
Yeah.
I sent my, a close family member 2 ounces of mushrooms a couple months ago because he watched a documentary on Netflix about how it helps depression,
Yeah.
So I've always loved mushrooms. I've loved all real psychedelics. I don't like research chemicals, but I have appreciation for them. They need to be used not as a recreational drug. It's not like, I had a long day at work, time to pop some shrooms, obviously.
Right. Time to pop some shrooms, or watch Fox or watch CNN. No.
Or even I know people who are at a stressful point in their life and decide to go take an acid trip and then wonder why they have a bad trip or something. And it's well, do it when you're not anxious. But as far as like
do when you're not anxious, or do it when you're anxious under the guidance of somebody who's going to be able to help you get through it. Because like that's kind of what sometimes what a trip is it's literally, you know, and some of the, you know, the biggest professionals will say this, and we'll get the name of you know who this is, but they literally will tell you that the stress of everything that you know that goes on, this you know, getting through that stress, that's the benefit, that's the giddy up, that's what you find out at the end of the trip, why you feel so good and why you have a different perspective, is because you had to figure things out differently because you were in this stressful situation. So sometimes I think that it can help like end of life people when you are literally the most anxious possible. You do it, you know, you have a trip and then you see new pathways to it, and it doesn't stress you out as much. And that's a pretty well studied thing, you know?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of therapeutic benefit with, you know, any spiritual experience. I mean, the people in AA who got sober, they all talk about this spiritual experience they had.
Yeah.
And that was because they took this treatment of herbs in the hospital at the time.
Yeah.
The belladonna treatment.
Yeah.
Which produced psychoactive results.
Yeah. Bill.
And then Bill Wilson then later advocated for the use of LSD for the alcoholic that's struggling to find a spiritual experience.
Right. Which was just then that got literally X'd out, you know, no one, you know, you don't go to an AA meeting, anyone talks about that. They'll talk about Bill Wilson all day, but they won't talk about how Bill Wilson was tripping on LSD big time to help him get through his stuff.
Oh, he was an interesting dude. He has like a seance room and stuff. He was like into spirits. He was an interesting cat, but yeah, that's if I think it's very beneficial. You know, I think it needs to be, people need to be educated on it more, like CBD. Like you shouldn't be buying your mushrooms at Walgreens on the way out, or you know, at 7-Eleven on the way out next to the Snickers kind of thing.
Yeah, it needs to be regulated for sure. Yeah. And hopefully that comes. Hopefully that's what, and hopefully Maine does it. You know, just like some of these other states, you know, Oregon, Colorado, that are starting to push it.
It's gonna be tough to regulate. I mean, it's gonna be tough to regulate anything that you can grow in cow shit. Like in Texas, you know, you walk in ranches with someone who knows what they're doing, and you pull the mushrooms out of cow patties.
Yeah, that's wild.
You know,
that's
let them dry.
That's what they talk about, right? It's so cool.
But
You've
now
seen
it's
that?
cool.
You've seen that? You actually done that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's cool, dude.
But
that's cool.
now
People
shrooms,
talk about that all the time, but like I've never actually met somebody who actually, you know, went in the shit and got the mushrooms.
Oh yeah. Well, it's literally like they're just like, you know, and then you just walk around and pick them out and then dry them off and then eat them eventually.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even mushrooms now, when I go buy mushrooms from someone, you know, they have like different strains of mushrooms. They'll have like penis envy and, you know, all
and they're different.
It's wild. And you know, that is cool now, because it used to be like, oh yeah,
5 years ago,
I got some shrooms, you know, and
then maybe the person would show up with shrooms. You didn't even know. They said, oh, I got some shrooms. Do you actually have them? Who knows? You know, because they were so hard to get, right? It was like a thing that nobody could actually get ever. It was a very special thing that came along.
Calling your shroom guy when you're like 5 minutes out of his house and him answering is like such a good feeling. Right. Like I've always had to drive like an hour, and then, you know, he could just not answer. Right. Oh, I forgot. Like we talked about this for 10 minutes, dude. Right. But that's just how it goes. But there's actually not psychedelic mushrooms. There's a company called Northern Spore in Westbrook, Maine, that's been doing a lot. Northern Spore Rips. They were just on the, have you had them? I know everything. I know all about them. Yeah, they were just on the cover of Beer and Weed. Yeah, and they were a big member of the first annual Maine Fungi Fest in Portland. Yeah, they're an awesome company. Mm-hmm. They're popping off. They are awesome. They provide grow kits and a lot of stuff for people, educations, and it's just you know, great. Maybe we'll get them as a sponsor. You can grow your own mushrooms at home. Yeah, no, Uncle of course. Ben's rice bag. Yeah, giddy up, man. You know, there's a lot of ways. Maybe we'll have somebody on the show who grows mushrooms on it, and we'll talk about it. You know, because that's a giddy up. Because that's coming, man. Like I said, Maine's coming. That's going to be a thing. You know, very, very soon. There's another guy we'll talk offline, but I can give you his number. His name's Steven. His name's Steven too, and he does treatments involving the venom of the frog from Peru. Oh, I need him. We need him. That dude's a trip. We need him, bro. Indigo Health Voyages. So I was going to do a website with him. Okay. And he is a caregiver too. I love it. Awesome. So we're going to do it all, man. And I know you got to get going. So yeah. We just had such an awesome day today. I want to appreciate you so much for coming on the show. And, we're definitely going to have to do it again for sure. You can have you back on. Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it. It was a good time. Like I said before, this is what I could talk about on my couch, with buddies. So I always always happy to come on.
Hey, well, that's it, baby. We're your buddy. We're just trying to, help everybody be well. It's a giddy up. We love you all. We love everybody. We just want to, we want to extend that forward. If anybody, we talked a lot about some serious stuff today. We talked about, we talked about guns. We talked about all that stuff. If anybody's ever struggling, needs help being well, reach out to us. Reach out to, the resources that are available to you in your community. We're going to help each other, man. That's what this is all about. So thanks so much, Drew, for coming on today, baby. Giddy up.
Oh, no problem. Thanks again.
All right, y'all. Be well.